Welcome to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie.
Welcome back. We are so excited. Today we have Jessica Wright with Inspire 360 joining us. And you have worked so hard as directors and owners to find great staff. And Jessica's got some secrets that she's going to share today about how to keep them. So, staff retention. Jessica, tell us a little bit about you, Inspire 360, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. So I started with InspireCare 360 a couple of years ago. And prior to that, I actually started my career about 20 years ago as a special education teacher. So I'll age myself a little bit there. And then from there, I started a fitness business and ran multiple locations. So I understand what it's like to be an owner and hiring and all of those good things and keeping good staff. And then from there, I actually owned and operated a indoor sports facility where we had after school programs and summer camps. So that's kind of where I fit into the childcare industry side of things as well. So I've been the teacher, I've been the owner, the business owner, and really know those, how painful it is sometimes to find those good teammates that we all strive for.
Absolutely. And if I understand right, InspireCare 360 even has some tools that we're going to talk about towards the end on basically I don't want to say how to retain staff, but tools that might help in staff retention. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes. So actually InspireCare 360 was built because our owner and CEO still owns childcare centers in upstate New York. And one of the things that he found is it was very difficult, not only like you all have been talking about recruiting good teachers, but keeping that staff. So InspireCare 360 was built on that. One of the biggest pain points that our solution helps with is really retaining. We do some recruiting, but retaining good teachers and how to empower them and help them belong. That's the biggest part of retention is everybody wants that sense of belonging and that good, strong culture.
Absolutely.
So,
Carrie, you look like you had a question.
Well, it was just, I was thinking, what is the biggest thing to do at your company? How do you guys make sure that you're onboarding your new staff well?
Mm-hmm. And Carrie, you hit it right, the nail on the head. It's that onboarding, right? So I'll kind of take a step back there. What happens? We look at hiring somebody, and of course you're hiring because you have to fill a need somewhere. And in the childcare industry, of course, it's typically usually a classroom. Like we got to get somebody in the infant or the toddler room, and we need to get them in there like yesterday. So we hire them, we show them a handbook or tell them a little bit about the company, or they have a teacher that they shadow a little bit, and then something happens and, oh, well, you're now in the classroom, right? And then unfortunately you spend all this time trying to make sure that they're all set and ready to go. But in the meantime, they're struggling because they didn't have that good onboarding process. And now they're burnout and they're ready to leave. And now you have to spend all that time and money to get somebody else in place. So here at InspireCare, as far as that was really, that's the cherry on top, right? If you can get that speed to competency, we kind of look at it these different levels, right? You've got that level where you're just trying to get them to be a competent staff member, right? So that's going to be your, read the handbook, understand our policies, understand our core values, what's our mission, making sure they have all those certifications, are they fit for the position, right? So that's where that's your investment. We call that our investment state, where you're investing in them to try to get them up to speed so that you can get them into the next level, which is that return on investment, where you start to see, okay, now they can move up to a different position and they can lead others, or they can be that mentor or so forth. So now you start to get an investment back from them. They're increasing your enrollments or making your business, start to bring in those funds. And what happens is a lot of times we don't do that speed to competency area correctly, and then we never reach that return on investment phase. So that's why we built out, at InspireCare 360, we call it peak performance. And I like to look at it as the co-pilot. So it's kind of like if you were to go out, on a trail and you just said, hey, go find your way from point A to point B. And nowadays, I mean, I can't get my car without using my navigation. So I don't know how anybody else does it, but I mean, it's like, I feel like I have to use it all the time. So that's what we like to look at peak performances. Also, we like to use this scenario. Have you ever, like, if you just threw a group of people in a boat and said, okay, row from here to that side, and everybody just starts rowing, and what happens? They spin in circles.
Probably end up either going in circles or not going anywhere.
Absolutely. So that we look at peak performance as, you've seen those professional rowers, and you've got the person that's at point on the boat, and then you have all of them, and that point person is guiding them, and they're telling them, and they're all rowing in the right direction, so you get from that point A to point B. So what we did with peak performance is it's actually 5 mastery levels, and the first 2 levels are those compulsory. So those are going to be the things that kind of, to make them competent, right? So that's going to be operational procedures. That's going to be your handbook. That's going to be your orientation. That's going to be, emergency procedures. Those are the things that we want our teachers, that they need to know to keep the kids safe, right?
Right.
Once you get, and those first 2 levels, those are mandatory levels. Then 3, 4, and 5, those are empowering them to do that. So that's going to be professional development. That's going to get them to the next level where they not only can do it, but now they can start to teach somebody else how to do it. And those are, we call them voluntary. So that way they don't have to do those during your day at work. They're voluntary, but each one of those, we tie some sort of incentive to it. And the reason is, so like, let's just say mastery level 3, and we built peak performance on what we call the 6Cs. So it's you as a business owner, is your core values, your curriculum. So what do you want the children to learn? It's your code of conduct. What are your standards there at the school? Career opportunities. So how are they going to advance? Because you don't want it to just be a job. You want it to be a career. You want them to become sticky in your business and help you elevate. Compliance. Obviously we have to, it's education. We have to follow regulations and licensing and all that. And then culture, which is a huge piece of it. You have to have a strong culture because nobody wants to stay in a yucky culture, right? So peak performance was built. Those next 3 levels are really to teach them those 6 C's. So for example, with our schools for mastery level 3, we actually tie our promotions and raises to it. So our standard across the board is you can't get a raise until you finish, mastery level 3. And so not only, and it's voluntary and they're getting an incentive for it, but it just empowers them to elevate and make it a career themselves. So instead of having those people that come to you at 6 months and say, well, I've been here 6 months or I've been here a year, so I think it's time for a raise. You set the standard, well, okay, great. Where are you at in peak performance? And, if they say, oh, well, I've finished the first 2 levels, great. When you finish level 3, you get a $1 raise and an extra PTO day. When you finish level 4, you get an additional $1.25, 2 more PTO days, and you're promotable. So for example, you can go to an assistant director or so forth. And then when you finish mastery level 5, and the whole 5 levels typically take 9 months to a year. So it's not something where, again, you're just giving them a piece of paper, they check the boxes and go on. It's built out where they're actually doing practicals to go along with the courses. They're going in there observing classrooms. They're being monitored. So it's not just, the screen in front of them, take the quizzes and so forth. No, they actually have to go out, apply it. Then they have to have somebody, observe them applying it. And there is even a mentor piece in it where they learn how to be a mentor, because ultimately when they get done with all 5 levels, we want them to be able to help the next person that comes in. And again, then at that point, they know, hey, I really belong here. I know how our culture is. I know what my expectations are. Let me help you. Let me take you under my wing and teach you. And so it just really I like to say it takes like that B- C employee and really gets them to that A+. And they do it themselves, which just gives you that sense of empowerment and that sense of belonging, because you're all striving for the same thing. And it doesn't have to be, so a lot of people ask us, well, I don't really do my raises that way. It doesn't have to be. We have members of ours that do like gift cards or bonuses or different things. So it's just, any sort of incentive. I'm a firm believer in positive reinforcement. And I feel like if you can do it, and that's the whole thing behind peak performance is you don't want to be chasing your employees and your staff and always constantly correcting them or micromanaging them. You want them to know, hey, these are our expectations. This is how, and we're all going to elevate each other. So you want to give them that, you've seen that where you chase the carrot, so they're going after it. They're really, and it just gives them that sense of belonging, that sense of empowerment.
All right. So I have a question because, we both apparently had a question. I'm louder today, so I'm going to ask my question first. I mean, this sounds like quite a mental shift, a mindset difference, probably for directors and owners who haven't come onto your program before or even really understood what Inspire 360 was. What is the first thing that you encourage the owner or director to think about from a mindset shift, which is exactly what this is?
Well, I think it's those 6Cs, right? Do you really know what your 6Cs are? Do you know what, your curriculum expectations are? Do you know what your core values are? That's important because you can always go back to that. That's not really one of our core values and how we do this. So it really goes back to those 6Cs. That's the first thing is make sure you understand those 6Cs. And then once you have that in place, then that's where you just set that standard, and you can't, you have to be consistent, which is another C. Ironically, it's not one of them, but that is a big thing. You have to be consistent because that's where your culture will break. If you're not consistent or you let things slide because we get in a bind and we're like, okay, that's not really the way we do things, but we're going to do it this time, or I'm going to let that teacher slide or get by on that. And that's when you get those small, tiny cracks in your culture, and eventually that'll fall apart. So that's what I would say is know your 6Cs first so that, everybody can understand those and be on the same page, be rowing in the same direction.
Absolutely.
So I was my brain was going with, I love the concept of helping the staff understand the core competencies and the culture. And that I liked the fact that about halfway through you were talking about the career opportunities, but then the practical side of me was like, okay, it sounds like they're going to be putting in a fair amount of effort and time into this. Do they get training certificates?
Absolutely. So that's a great question, Carrie. So the great thing is all of ours that we've developed as far as InspireCare 360, all of ours are ISAT accredited. So they actually earn CEUs. At the end of each one, they get certificates. And then our peak performance, we have what's called badges. And those are badges that they receive that they can actually put up on LinkedIn or post, or those are there. So they can say, hey, I completed mastery level 1. I completed mastery level 2. So that's a great question. They do get badges and they get certificates for CEUs that they can use for their certifications and so forth. And we've also built it out where we've built out peak performance plus CDA. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with what a CDA is, but basically it's an associate's degree for teachers. So we built it out where they can actually do peak performance and their CDA at the same time. So when they get done, they've not only, but now they've completed 120 hours of credits to go towards their CDA as well. And then we built out peak performance just plus in general, where you can customize it and put in your own courses. So if there's something in particular for your childcare center that you're like, this is our standard, you can customize that as well.
Great. So I'm going to play the devil's advocate. What are the reasons why people would not? I mean, I'm listening to this, I'm going, okay, this seems like something that every childcare center should do. Is there a reason why programs don't? What are some of the main objections that directors give you or owners give you? They're not small, they're not big enough, they're too small.
So I don't think it comes with that. I think it still comes down to, we still don't have staff that are doing it. So why is that? And when we were in the beta phase of this, we realized one of our schools, one of our directors actually did something very unique. And we have 4 schools that we still own and operate. But one director at her school put all of the staff's names on a whiteboard, and then they had a little competition. So you gamify it, right? We're a society where we're all about games and that competition and so forth. And it made all the difference. That school, every single employee and staff participated and completed it and did it. The other schools still had, part of them did, part of them didn't. So I think it still comes down, even though they should be motivated by the incentive, unfortunately, it doesn't always happen that way. But I tell you what, you start making it a fun little game or a challenge, and all of a sudden, the competitive side of people come out. So that was kind of the biggest thing. The other, I would say, as far as objections, is finding the right incentives. Just again, you don't want it to be too small because you want it to be something that they're motivated to get. And sometimes it's not in the budget necessarily to do their promotions or their raises that way. So we try to get creative in helping them figure out, because that's the second piece. First is, know your 6Cs, so that we know what you're wanting your team to accomplish. And then you need to know, what are your incentives going to be? So we always put those things in place before we, introduce it to staff.
Okay.
Well, I think the fact that Inspire 360 still has programs that they're actively running, so that it's not just theoretically, this is something that maybe could work. We've talked about it and talked to other people who've run schools, and they think probably it's something you're actually road testing with schools that you have a vested interest in making sure it works.
Absolutely. I think that I really do think that makes us unique. Our schools may not think so because they become the guinea pigs sometimes, but it is helpful because you get that feedback from staff and our families too. They're willing to give that feedback on what they think as well. So absolutely.
Oh, well, awesome. I love the fact that you're basically talking about retention from basically the point of hiring. And I think that is just such, again, I feel like that's part of that mindset shift that we run across a lot of owners that are so hung up on the body in a classroom that they totally forget the onboarding, like you mentioned, let alone planning to have this person for years because they, for whatever reason, have gotten into the cycle. And we've noticed it a lot more since 2020 that we've got, just staff in general in a cycle of turnover. And so I would suspect you guys have data related to how programs are not cycling through staff.
Absolutely. Well, and right now in the childcare industry, I think the turnover rate is somewhere around 45 to 50. It might even be higher, 50%. That's within the first year. So that's where, if you can get them to where they're staying in that second year, that drops drastically. I think I think it drops down to like 17% will stay. And then it's, you get them another year in there, it's less than 5%, that will leave. So that's, you bring up a good point. I mean, we've done the research and watched the turnover rates come down drastically when you have a system in place. It just keeps everybody on the same page, and you don't get those cracks in your culture if, you have those expectations. And, we don't leave everybody high and dry either. That's a huge part of what we do is we help them build out their onboarding too. We do handbooks, we do orientations with them. So, they're not just trying to get all the pieces together. We'll actually help them build that out as well. Because you're right, Kate, it does. It starts from the day they're hired to really get them to a career path, that they want to stay with you and they want to grow.
Yeah, one of the books I read recently actually was talking about the onboarding actually starts earlier than their first day, because a lot of times you hire them and then there's a delayed start because you got to get your criminal background checks back. They might be giving notice at their previous employer or whatever. And so onboarding starts from the moment you offer the position. And if they don't hear anything from you in the 2 to 3 weeks that background checks are being run and they're giving notice, why would they want to come to work for you?
Absolutely.
It's got to start from the time that you offer the position, that you're integrating them into your culture and into your community.
Absolutely. I mean, 100%. I couldn't agree more, because you're right. It's that communication, another C, right? They want to hear from you. They're excited, and you want to keep them excited to get there and be a part of your team.
Yeah, they want to know what to do, not just their first day. And
right.
Even the first day, I've discovered that that's a lot of times where people even just like kind of forget, You got to tell them when, where, and what to expect. And
Absolutely.
I am one of those guilty people who also like to know what's going to happen my first few weeks. And so, and don't just say, I'll find it in my email when I get there.
No.
That doesn't really work for me. So
No, one of the
Nobody
things
totally
I
does.
do is I build out a 2-week onboarding so that they know what every day is going to look like for the first 2 weeks. I try to do that for our team and send that out to them before they start and say, hey, we'll go over this. I'll walk you through it. I just want you to see it ahead of time so you know what to expect. And I think that does make a world of difference. It just takes, and I'll even say, hey, we're gonna maybe move things around because timing of some stuff might not work. So we'll be flexible, and if you feel a little overwhelmed, we'll back it down. But at least they have a little bit of an idea of what to expect, and then it takes that anxiety and keeps the excitement high.
Oh, sounds great. So, Jessica, anything you would like to kind of end as we kind of wrap up that you want to make sure that a director or an owner who's listening kind of knows what to do as far as how they would know whether or not this is a good fit for them?
Sure. Well, I think it's just, really look at your school and your turnover rate, and communication is key. Ask other staff where they see things. And then just start thinking about that. What are your 6 C's, and where are your gaps in your team, and start trying to build on that.
Yep.
Plan,
If you
plan,
don't know what
plan.
your if you don't know what your core values are and your culture is, it's really hard to hire the right people into your program.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It is.
Apparently, we all have the same idea. So, well, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode. And I don't know, we'll figure out what number it is at some point in time. And
It'll start with a 2.
it'll start with a 2. And with that, if you are listening and you got something out of today, feel free to leave a comment. Send us an email at kateandcarrie@childcareconversations.com. You can go into Spotify or Apple Podcast, however you listen to it, and leave a review or rate or whatever that platform does. But you can also just do a good old-fashioned share with other directors and owners that you know who you think might get something out of today's episode.
Thank you for listening to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie. Want to learn more? Check out our website at texasdirector.org. And if you've learned anything today, leave us a comment below and share the show.